Good morning, good evening, and good night, YouTube. This is Trey here from Team Hotheads, and I'm coming at you with my Ancient Warrior deck profile, otherwise known as Dynasty Warriors. And we're going to get right into the deck profile, starting with the monsters. So, starting off with the monsters, we're playing 3 copies of Ancient Warrior Masterful Sun Mu. Sun Mu is your go-to starter card. Sun Mu has the ability similar to Lu Xuan, where he cannot be targeted for an attack if you control another Ancient Warrior monster. He also allows you to send the Ancient Warrior card, or not Ancient Warrior card, send any card from your hand or field to the graveyard to search an Ancient Warrior card from your deck. So he's basically your strangles for the deck, and he's the card you're going to want to see the most. Following him up, we have 3 copies of Ancient Warrior Virtuous Lu Xuan. Now, Lu Xuan can be played at 2 or 3. I personally have him at 3 right now, but he's an easy side out if I only need 2 of them. He has a similar first effect as a Sun Mu, where he cannot be targeted for an attack if you control another Ancient Warrior monster. And you also can special summon an Ancient Warrior monster if your opponent controls, I believe, another monster. Let me see, make sure. Is if your opponent controls more monsters than you do, you can send 1 card from your hand or field to the graveyard, special summon an Ancient Warrior monster from your deck, except Lu Xuan. So as long as your opponent controls more monsters than you, which if you're going second, most of the time they will, you can send a card to summon an Ancient Warrior monster, and then if an Ancient Warrior monster attacks or declares an attack, he can draw you a card. Following these guys up, we have 2 copies of Ancient Warriors Ingenious Zhuge Kong. Zhuge Kong is a spell trap negator, and he can, it's a quick effect, negate spell traps by sending a Ancient Warrior card from your side from a spell trap from your field to the graveyard. He also can special summon himself if he's searched by the effect, if he's added to the hand by the effect of an Ancient Warrior card, he can special summon himself to the field. And there are 2 cards currently in the deck that can add him to hand. Well, 3 cards that can add him to hand. Also, if you control Lu Xuan while you control Zhuge Kong, you can also negate a monster effect. So that's a good thing to keep in note. A lot of times I will end my board with a Zhuge Kong and a Masterful Sun Mu, but if you are able to end the board with Masterful Sun Mu and Lu Xuan, you are able to negate spell traps or monster effects with Zhuge Kong. The next 2 of, and personally my favorite card in the deck, is Ancient Warriors Rebellious Lu Feng, the newest card that's been added to the deck. This is Lu Bu. This is the big bad boss guy, and he's the card I've been waiting for. 2800 attack, and he is just a beast. He can special summon himself to the field as long as you control the strongest attack point Ancient Warrior monster. Now, that being said, if your opponent is also playing Ancient Warriors and they have a strong Ancient Warrior on the field, you won't be able to special summon them to the field. But if you're playing any other deck, which you probably will, because not many people are playing Ancient Warriors, he's basically a free special summon. He also can destroy the strongest monster your opponent controls without targeting it. He has a quick effect that allows you just to destroy the strongest card on your opponent controls. If it's a tie, you choose. The only drawback from this guy is at the end of your turn, at the end of the turn, if he's not the strongest monster on the field, he switches control to whatever player controls the strongest monster on the field. So if you go second and you're not necessarily able to completely break your opponent's board and they still have a strong monster on the field, if you can't get rid of that monster before you end your turn, they will gain control of your Lu Feng. So you do have to keep that in mind. But considering he can destroy the strongest monster your opponent controls, that hopefully should not happen if you play your cards right. Moving on with the Pike Brothers, as I like to call them, I have Ancient Warriors Valiant Zhang Dai. Zhang Dai can special summon himself if you control 2 or more Ancient Warrior monsters. He also has an effect where if your opponent controls more cards than you do, you can attack your opponent's monsters up to 2 per turn. He also gains attack points depending on how many monsters your opponents control. So he just becomes a really powerful beast stick, especially when you're going second. You drop him down and just start swinging at things. The third of the Pike Brothers is Ancient Warriors Loyal Guan Yu. Now, Guan Yu was my brother's favorite person to use in Dynasty Warriors, whereas my favorite person was Lu Bu. Guan Yu and Lu Bu are like just the 2 most badass guys in Dynasty Warriors. Guan Yu is a Cyber Dragon. If your opponent controls more cards than you do, more monsters than you do, you special summon them to the field. If your opponent controls more monsters than you do, you can target and destroy one of your opponent's monsters. Now, he targets Lu Feng does not, but they both allow you to destroy a card your opponent controls. So that's why when I say you make your plays correctly, you can just kind of pick your opponent's board apart. Combine with the spell card that you guys know I'm running because this is a go second rogue deck. This guy plus Lu Feng can just really just pick your opponent's board apart if you play them in the proper sequencing. And at the end of the day, essentially that's what you're going to do with this deck. Now, we don't want our opponent really just catching us off guard. So we do have 3 one-ofs, and that is 1 Ancient Warriors Jia 1 Ancient Warriors Zhang Juan, and 1 Ancient Warriors Cao Day. Now, Cao Day is basically Cao for those who play the Dynasty Warriors games. Cao Day can special summon himself if a card is destroyed on your opponent's side of the field. You send a card from your hand or field to the graveyard, special summon Cao Day. If he destroys a monster by battle, similar to Guyo Guardian, he can bring it back to your side of the field. Zhang Juan is a hand trap, essentially. During battle, before damage calculation, if you attack if you have Ancient Warrior monster battles, you can reduce the monster they're battling by 1,000 attack and then special summon him. Also, if your opponent has while he's on the field, if your opponent's card is destroyed, you can target a card your opponent controls and destroy it. So basically, then that will also trigger Cao Day. So basically, if you have both these guys in your hand, you can swing at something that maybe you can't beat over, reduce it by 1,000, destroy it, reduce by 1,000, summon him, destroy it. Since you destroy the card, both these guys are triggered, especially if he's in your hand. You can then pop a card and then special summon him as well. And just to slow our opponent down, because, you know, we are going second, we are playing 2 copies of Effect Veiler and 2 copies of Ash Blossom. These hand traps can be whatever you want. Personally, I don't have my infinite permanents anymore. If I have infinite permanents, that will also be in the hand trap lineup. I typically go in and out of what I'm using for my hand traps. Ash Blossom is kind of always there, but Effect Veiler is not always the second option. Sometimes it's Ghost Ogre, sometimes it's DD Crow, sometimes it's Nibiru. It really just depends on my matchup. And the last monster I, of course, am running since I'm going second is 1 Dino Wrestler Pankratops. Pankratops can come out, but essentially, like I said, with this deck, you're going to go second. You're going to pick your opponent's board apart, and with the monster effects you have, you can really, that's really easy to do. Pankratops can pop a card, Guan Yu can pop a card, Lu Feng pops a card, and Sun Mu can bounce a card. So that's kind of the name of the game. It's just pick your opponent's board apart, and then we're going to play it our way. And to help us pick our opponent's board apart, we're going to be moving on to the spells and traps. So moving on to the spells and traps, we're going to be playing the most important Ancient Warriors card, and that is 3 copies of Ancient Warriors 3 Visits. 3 Visits is just an all-around great Ancient Warriors card. I absolutely love 3 Visits. 3 Visits allows you to, when you summon an Ancient Warrior monster while you control 3 Visits, you can search your deck for another Ancient Warrior card of a different name. If Ancient Warriors 3 Visits is sent to the graveyard from your field, let me just send to the graveyard, actually, double check that math. Yes, Spell Trap Card Zone. I believe they all share that. If they're sent from the Spell Trap Card Zone to the graveyard, they have an additional effect. In this case, 3 Visits is you can push summon an Ancient Warrior card from your hand. So one of the things I would love to do is send Ancient Warriors with the effect of Sun Mu to search for Ancient Warriors Zhuge Kong, which will then make a chain link so you can protect the ones. You can attempt this on Zhuge Kong, and then you can activate the effect of 3 Visits. 3 Visits will then push them to something else. So depending on how many Ancient Warriors you have in your hand, you can go from 1 monster to 3 very easily. Following the very amazing 3 Visits, we have my other favorite Ancient Warrior spell card, which is 3 copies of Ancient Warriors East by South Winds. Now, remember when I said that the name of this game is picking your opponent's board apart? This is the card that allows you to pick your opponent's board apart. You don't have to OTK your opponent if you can do all the things this deck can do. Ancient Warriors 3 Visits, East by South Winds, allows you to flip a coin. If it's heads, it sends itself to the graveyard. Now, your opponent will look at you and go, what's the point of that? Well, other than it being another Ancient Warriors spell or trap card name for you to use, its graveyard effect when it's sent from the field to the graveyard says that for the rest of the turn, your opponent cannot respond to the activation of any Ancient Warrior monster effect. It also gives them the effect of when they declare an attack, they can target a card your opponent controls and destroy it. So now you have, and that's all, it depends on the Ancient Warriors you have when it resolves. But if you play your cards right, when you resolve, you should have two to three Ancient Warriors on your field when this card resolves. It's also a good card to beat out your opponent because that secondary effect is they're not going to want to let that resolve. So it's a good card to beat your opponent with. But basically, you do that so then you can pop a card with Lu Feng, pop a card with Guan Yu, pop a card with Pankratops, bounce a card with Sun Mu, and then when you enter battle phase, every time you declare an attack with any of your Ancient Warriors that was on the field, when this card resolved, you can also then target and destroy another card. And if we go back to our Zhuge Zhuan and Cao Dai, if Zhuge Zhuan, if there's a card destroyed while he's on the field, you get to pop another card. If a card is destroyed while Cao Dai is in your hand, you get to summon Cao Dai. So there's just so much synergy with destroying your opponent's cards. And in the event that you run into a deck where you can't just destroy the cards, you just revert back to Sun Mu and just start bouncing their cards. The next card we have for spells is Ancient Warriors Burrowing Arrows. Now, Burrowing Arrows does allow you to cut your opponent's monster attack in half, so if you're running against something really big that you can't just beat over, which by the time you get to battle phase, if you haven't bounced or destroyed anything that you can't beat over, you probably did something wrong. So I almost never really use that first effect to gain attack. The effect I typically use is to, when I send it to the graveyard, if you control an Ancient Warrior monster, you basically can replace this Ancient Warrior's Burrowing Arrow with the East by South Winds or 3 Visits. So that's pretty much the reason we use Burrowing Arrows. The other card you could replace Burrowing Arrows with is Defensive Chang Bang. This card has a couple effects. One of the effects is that your opponent cannot activate spells and traps starting when you're battling with an Ancient Warrior monster. When your opponent goes into battle phase, you can send it to the graveyard, and then your opponent cannot target your Ancient Warrior monsters for an attack. And when it's in the grave, you can banish it when an attack is declared involving your Ancient Warrior monster to special summon another Ancient Warrior monster. The best guys to combo this card with are Lu Zhuan and Sun Mu. If you send it to the grave, it stops your opponent from being able to attack. If it's already in the grave and you have, say, Sun Mu or Lu Zhuan on the field, and you banish it and summon either Lu Zhuan or Sun Mu, it'll put your opponent in a little bit of a lock where once they're already in the battle phase, and now they can't declare an attack on them because they have the effect that says, if you have another Ancient Warrior monster on the field, they can't be targeted for an attack. So it's another way to get yourself out of a sticky little situation, essentially. And so, for the other card that you can essentially replace Defensive Chang Bei with, a lot of times I replace Burrowing Arrows with the trap cards. So Defensive Chang Bei is one. The other one is Ancient Warrior Saga Chivalrous Path. This is the other new trap card that came out with Lu Feng. This card has three effects similar to Chang Bei, but you really only use 2 of them. The first one allows you to keep your Ancient Warrior monster from being destroyed by battle. You send this to the graveyard instead. The next effect allows you to push summon a token if your opponent push summons a monster, which you may or may not use. The third effect has a graveyard effect similar to Chang Bei. If your card is targeted with a card effect while it's in the graveyard, you can banish it from the grave to negate that card's effect. So like I said, these cards essentially come out. If you don't draw them offhand, you basically bring them out by sending Burrowing Arrows to the graveyard. At least that's how I do it. I think that's the most optimal way to do it. Rounding out our spells and traps, we have, of course, our Beast Warrior support, 3 copies of Fire Formation Tenki. It's a great card to bait out Ash with, because they won't let you add level 4, and essentially the level 4 you're going to need it. So if you already have Sun Mu, this is definitely a great card to start with, because they're going to assume you're activating it because you need to get Sun Mu, in which case they'll probably waste an Ash Blossom on this, so you can then use Sun Mu's effect. To go with Tenki, I do have 2 copies of Fire Formation Tensu. This is for the times when you have Sun Mu and Lu Zhuan in hand. This helps you get them both on the field. And a lot of times this card is just sent to the graveyard to use the effects of my Ancient Warriors cards. I'm also playing 2 copies of Pot of Extravagance. I didn't want to max out on 3. A lot of times I kept drawing into Extravagance off of Extravagance, which is what I don't want to do. So I did keep it at 2. I see it just often enough. I don't need to see it all the time, just because Tenki can search a card, Sun Mu can search a card, and the extra deck monster can search a card, and then most of the monsters special summon themselves. So I do typically want to see more of the Ancient Warriors monsters in my hand versus a bunch of spells and traps. Since I'm going second, the next card we are playing is 2 copies of Dark Ruler No More. This can easily be 3 copies of Dark Ruler No More. I mean, my last spell card is a Monster Reborn. So this can easily be 3 copies of Dark Ruler No More. Dark Ruler No More basically says I don't care what my opponent just played. If they don't have a Judgment or like Spell Trap or some type of combo to stop this Dark Ruler No More, 9 times out of 10, you are going to pick your opponent's board apart after playing Dark Ruler No More. You're going to, like I said, you're going to bounce everything, pop everything. It's not really going to matter what they have. If they are playing something with a more graveyard-heavy effects, then you will likely want to stick with like Sun Mu and bouncing their cards. But if it doesn't matter, you can just destroy everything and then swing for game, which is what I typically do after my second turn after doing Dark Ruler No More, because you can't swing for game when you play Dark Ruler No More. Don't let anyone cheat you like that. If you play Dark Ruler No More, you don't do any battle damage. So don't let anybody do that to you. Like I said, this last card, Monster Reborn, can be anything you want it to be. I have it as Monster Reborn, just for the simple fact that, this is what I had on hand at the time. So with that being said, we're going to move on to the extra deck. All right, we're going to close out this deck by quickly going through the extra deck. And I say quickly going through the extra deck simply because I honestly have a 15-card extra deck, only ever going about 5 of these cards. That's the reason I'm playing, things like Pot of Extravagance, because you don't play Pot of Extravagance if you need your extra deck. So, the first card in the extra deck that is a mandatory is 3 copies of Ancient Warriors, Double Dragon Lords. This is essentially almost like the only card I go into in the deck. If I have to go into more than Double Dragon Lords, I'm probably not going to win that game. Double Dragon Lord searches an Ancient Warrior card on summon, and it also allows you to send a card from your hand or field to the graveyard to bounce a card on your opponent's field back to the hand. Combos very well with Sun Mu, because Sun Mu will trigger off of this guy, which will allow you to bounce another card back to the opponent's hand. You can also search cards like Lu Fang or Borrowing Arrows. You could search Borrowing Arrows, activate Borrowing Arrows, use Dragon Lord, send Borrowing Arrows to bounce a card, and then replace Borrowing Arrows with something else, which will also allow you to thin your deck out a little bit as well. So this is just absolutely a great link monster. Following up that, I do have 1 copy of Firefighting Doromadal. It's just a Beast Warrior link monster. It's a link 2. Like I said, I basically never go into this guy. Then we do have 2 level 4s. We have 1 Skull Dread and 1 Appaloosa. Again, I've never gone into either one of these link 4 monsters since I've been playing the deck. But Skull Dread could, you could go into 4 Ancient Warrior monsters very easily. Then you go into Skull Dread, and now you have, you can replace your hand if your hand's not looking good. Same thing with Goddess of the Bow. You could go into 4 Ancient Warriors easily, and then replace those 4 Ancient Warriors after you say you've taken your turn, used your Dark Ruler No More, kind of picked your opponent's board apart. You can send those 4 Ancient Warriors to the grave to then go into Goddess Bow, and then you have a 4 negate Goddess Bow on the field. So that is one way you can play it. If you have Monster Reborn, you can also bring back a Ancient Warrior after you do that. So after Link Monsters, I am playing a Utopia package of 1 copy of Utopia, 1 Utopia Prime, and 1 Utopia Lightning. These are for those monsters that have pesky little effects during the battle phase, graveyard effects that will trigger if I attack them, or monsters that are just really, really strong. 5K is pretty strong as well. So you just go into Lightning. They can't really do it. They can't use their effects, and you just basically swing over everything at that point. I actually was able to out someone who was playing a mask hero kind of deck, and he went an absolute 0, which would just suck for my Ancient Warrior deck. As a lot of my cards need to be on the field, and if you blew up everything at one time, it really wouldn't help me. So I just went into Lightning and swung over the absolute 0. For more rank 4 support, we have Brotherhood of Fireface Tiger King, who can negate anything that's not a Beast Warrior. Gaga Cowboy, going for game. Number 41, Baguska. If you just really draw a really bad hand and you're worried about what your opponent might do, maybe you went through game 1, they have some shenanigans, you go to Baguska off of Lu Juan and Sun Mu and just try to stall for a couple turns. Tornado Dragon for back row heavy decks, Pendulum decks. You just don't let them keep anything on the field. Abyss Dweller for graveyard heavy decks, like Shadows, things of that nature. And then just to round it off, I am playing 1 Punter Patrol Mork. He has an okay effect on your turn, but this is just to round out the extra deck. Like I said, I almost never go into anything other than Double Dragon Lords. At most, I may go into Lightning or Abyss Dweller, just because the meta does have a lot of back row, not back row, but the meta has a lot of graveyard effects. So I may go into Abyss Dweller, I may go into Utopia Lightning, but other than that, the deck essentially is so strong that it kind of just stands on its own. And that's kind of the reason I love it. You basically just use your main deck, you got a little bit of the extra deck with this guy, and that's all you need. And that's the best part about it. So everyone, that was the Ancient Warriors deck profile, Dynasty Warriors deck profile, my current favorite deck that I'm playing. I will be back with another new deck profile for you guys. Anyway, I hope you have a wonderful good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. This is Trey from Team Hotheads. I will see you guys in the next video. Let me know if you like the deck profile. Like, comment, subscribe, share it with your friends, spread it around. And as always, have a happy time doing, guys. See you later.